Okay, we are live. Hello, Amy.
Woohoo! Hi, Aunt Angelo. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, and you?
I'm doing good.
So, I was listening to your interaction at the Discord channel with Dart,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to know your thoughts about that interaction. I'll not call you Newman. I'll call you Amy.
You called me.
Uh, okay, so go ahead.
Um, so Darth is known in the debating community. I actually hadn't asked me anything on there with his viewers once, or the people who talk on there, but he never came down, and so I've always been just kind of hanging out in the channel, but I didn't know when I should go in. I didn't want it to be awkward or anything. And so I just went in when it didn't seem like a lot of people were there today, just kind of pushed myself in. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think I know what set it up wrong and why. Because I was like, why did it get so heated? And it could be personalities. It might have been that it got heated so fast because I think it started with the whole trans thing when I went in there today. And it took Darth basically coming in, to his credit, and taking them off that topic to actually start talking about God again. I mean, he was doing it because he doesn't believe that I can make value judgments. I actually learned a lot. Some of his specific language I need to take a harder look into, like value judgments, which are something very specific. I know it's Darth's channel, and so you're coming into someone's home, and so I don't think I should be the one that talks the most. But as someone who likes to ask questions, just doesn't feel like a very friendly environment to ask questions unless you're going to accept the answer. Now, I could be wrong, and I'd like to continue to have more conversations with Darth, even if I got heated. I still love you. It's not about that. It's just, and I understand it is his channel, and he should have the ability to speak as much as he wants. But it just felt like every time I was about to say a question, he would say, okay, you can ask that question. And then he would ask the question, I'd answer the question, then give me another question. And I'd be like, but wait, we've already moved on. I want to ask a question about this. And he'd be like, no, we're almost there. Just keep on moving through the chain. And it took about an hour to move through the entire chain to where I started to get some questions, and he started to pin me on being a hard atheist. Because he was just ranting about soft atheists when I am one of the rare atheists that puts propositions for, not the rare atheist, but the joke is I call myself a medium atheist. I think that there are good reasons not to believe in specific gods. I think I need to ask questions and have them answered just like Darth does to get you there. But trying to think if there's anything else. Well, what were you thinking on, Tangelo?
Well, as you said correctly, you were at his Discord server, so he can, of course, set the way that he interacts with others. It's his style, and it has to be respected.
Sure.
I don't know if it is productive, and I've seen atheists criticizing his approach as being like an interrogation rather than a conversation.
Yes. Yeah, that was that feeling. It was like every time I even tried to just get clarification, questions weren't good. My own personal questions weren't good. We had to just go through what, as many atheists say, the script, and you can't say, I don't know. I mean, it's almost semi-famous in this for just saying he doesn't accept I don't know, so we have to take a yes or no. Yes or no leads him to two different questions that he likes to pose before atheists, whether you do think there's an ultimate or not. But I will say why I think Darth comes off ungenuine and he does all this stuff is because he makes little comments like, I didn't even say there was a God. And that's true, because what he's doing is he's being politically correct. And I'll define that is his arguments are put forward to be as inoffensive as possible. And since and that doesn't really always come off well when we're talking about God and the conversation is about God, and then in the middle you're kind of like, well, where is God? And they're like, no, who brought up God? God. We're talking about ultimates. But don't you think the God is the ultimate? I don't know. It didn't feel like a conversation, if that makes sense. You know, he thought that I was looking down on him, that I was treating him like a teenager. I never said he was stupid or question academic credentials or any of this stuff. I only care about the truth. It's all that matters.
Well, I think you knew already how he interacts with unbelievers, with atheists, and of course, you knew what you would be served going to his stream. So you were prepared.
I guess I was and I wasn't. It's so totally different when you're in the hot seat, because even I was cocky. Because I'll be honest with you, part of in a debate, part of how you get your ideas across is by asking questions and having the person give the answer that you think they're going to give. So thus they say it themselves, which is all Darth does. But he won't allow any of that back. So it's like, okay, well, is it a conversation, or are you just trying to teach me? If you're just trying to teach me, then then I should just say yes to everything and write it down. But if you want to know my beliefs, it doesn't feel like he actually wants to know. It just feels like he wants to get us, that he wants to just convert us, deconvert us, or no, convert us. Yeah. Doesn't feel like it's this.
You saw, as I asked him about the approach right when you left, and he said, well, my aim, my goal is to destroy the views of what atheists claim. And that has to be first done in order then to bring the gospel.
Well, then I think he is unsuccessful for that. I think he is very good at getting a band of people who think that they are good intellectual questions. But I think once he actually does the interrogation, I think it pisses off both atheists and theists alike. I think that's why he gets so much flack.
Well, I mean, of course, he is receiving a lot of attention. He is being restreamed at least 2 YouTube channels. So atheists are actually noticing his approach. I think this is great. And at the beginning, actually, I didn't understand what he was saying. And then I said, well, I want to understand it better. So I decided to go to his Discord server and just listening. And I mean, there are some core concepts which he brings up all the time, and core questions which he makes all the time. And I think they are very clear. And I agree with his entire position. We are holding both the same beliefs, but there are differences in how I try to interact with atheists. So I think this is something maybe a little bit unique of him. And if you want to have a conversation, then you have to deal with that. And when I go to his server, then I also don't try to talk too much, because I'm inevitably being interrupted as like everyone else. So he likes to talk and to listen to himself, and he seems not to be very interested to actually listen to what the other side wants to say and to expose. And he says, well, because they are sidestepping and so forth, they are not being honest. And you've heard it, what he said.
And if I may say, it makes us feel like we're the product. We're just customer number 3270. Let me come in here. I got to say my script. We're either going to say yes or no. We're going to get you there, and then I'm going to tell you why you have no grounding and why you need a God. It's like, okay, but If you don't
Yeah.
already believe, that is not to me, it is not a very persuasive way of convincing someone to your point of view. I view presuppositionalists as basically asking some of the hardest unanswerable questions in today's philosophy and saying, answer them. And when you're unable to answer them, you go, aha, and then you try to point to a God. That's not a paraphrasing, but that seems to be the presuppositionalist stick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, but I still think that we have the answer, and it is a logical answer. It is an evidence-based answer. It is an answer based on what the presup approach is about, that God has revealed himself through the Bible, through the natural world. And I agree with Dart that atheists have not been able to provide anything even closely coherent to back up the proposition that the natural physical material world is all there is and that an ultimate creator is not required.
I'm not saying it is required. I was just pointing out that Darth doesn't have a good reason to think it is required or that it's a god.
That's the crux issue. Actually, that's what we are trying to figure out, and that's where the dispute is. That we as believers think that there are no alternatives. That there must be someone paraphrasing the presup verbiage. If there is no ultimate unchanging creator which instantiates what is possible or not possible, then you have no alternative.
I disagree. I don't understand how this ultimate being, except for the fact that claiming that it does solve it, and that by calling it ultimate and saying this is the thing that grounds everything, but they don't have actual evidence to say this is the ground. It's kind of like if God were real, then he would be the grounding for everything. It's like, cool, but I want to know if God's real.
Yes, but then comes the answer that if you remove God from the equation, then everything becomes absurd, because then there is no mechanism which actually secures what is possible or impossible.
You just have logic. Those questions seem like, why is logic even exist? But that's a different question.
No, I think you just sidestep something which has nothing to do with what I just said. And
What did I say?
with that, I mean, when we say that if you remove God, then there is nothing which instantiates what is possible or impossible, then when we go to the ontological issue in question, it is about what has to be in the beginning, like what is constantly mentioned are the laws of physics. And that was very interesting today with your interaction with him, when you confirmed that the laws of physics, they break down at the Big Bang. If they break down,
he didn't understand what breakdown. I do want to point out, he didn't seem to understand what breakdown means. Breakdown means that so in a big hole, both the models for general relativity and quantum mechanics no longer work because they're on both scales. And so people are currently trying to tie everything together. It's called the theory of everything, but really it's just the theory of understanding what happens at a black hole using quantum mechanics and general relativity. But it only breaks down because we don't understand it yet.
Well, what makes you confident that no creator is required to instantiate them?
I don't know why. I have no idea why a creator, like, I don't know why a person would make the universe. It just goes against everything we know. Like an agent making the physical or natural laws. I just don't understand how. I don't understand why. We were getting really close to finally my questions when he kicked me from the chat. But I still love you, Tara. I still love you. But we were just starting to get into agency. And I really wanted to ask him questions on, this agent being a thinking being that has thoughts and feel. He said feelings. I almost thought I used feelings. I almost thought I shouldn't have used that word. But then he said, no, this God has feelings. And so it seems very human-like.
And it is perfectly logic that God created us humans similar to him. And I mean, if you posit that just the matter can instantiate the mind with all its expressions like memory and feelings and thoughts and will and so forth, this is something which in substance is different than physical matter. And this is a big problem. This is the hard problem of consciousness, which there is no explanation why or how that
Well,
could emerge from physical things.
I'd actually push back on that. I think we do know why minds arose. I think they had good reason to do. They were highly motivated because there was an arms race. The multicelled organisms had just occurred, and plants had just become able to photosynthesize, and so that left the two other branches. There were fungus that inject their stomach acid onto the environment, and then there is conscious creatures, animals. And what we do is we are actually an operating system for the body to walk around in the macroscopic landscape. And so with that understanding of consciousness, I am not 100% sure. Like, it seems like God needs us more than we need him.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but you were once at Speed's channel, and I was there too. And then you said that the hardware produces the software, and then immediately you saw the craziness which you just said, because I asked you, well, can you demonstrate or give me an example where hardware produces software? And of course, that is not existence, because we know that only intelligence
Wait,
produces software, but
well, hold
matter
on.
doesn't produce software.
That's discounting natural consciousness. You're basically saying this consciousness isn't natural, therefore can you give me an example of natural consciousness? But I am claiming this is natural consciousness.
Well, how can you back that up?
Because of what consciousness is. Consciousness is a system of awareness for observing data. You can be more or less conscious. You can be completely unconscious.
Yes, but that doesn't explain the origin of consciousness.
The origin of consciousness comes in the multicellular arms race. There was no consciousness before multicellular organisms.
That's
Because
just a claim.
consciousness, huh?
That's just a claim.
I agree, and it could be a black swan fallacy. Once again, I will say what I did with Darf. It's that all of the current evidence is that is how it works. All the current evidence is that a creator needs a creator. It could be the fact that there are creators without creators. We just don't have evidence for it.
Well, if you would say that a creator needs a creator, then that creator would also require a creator. You would have an infinite regress, and you would have no starting point.
But can you give me an example of a creator that had no creator, except for the thing you're trying to prove?
Well, we start from the premise that something cannot come from nothing, and by nothing I mean the ontological nothing, which is the opposite of something. So absolutely nothing, as being the absence of anything, has no creative powers. And if that would have been anywhere and at any moment the ontological state of affairs, then there would still be absolutely nothing. So the fact that there is something and that something cannot come from absolutely nothing means that something must have always existed.
And I cannot comment on that because I don't. Well, I can only comment to say that I'm not convinced nothing can exist. I could be proven otherwise, but that's just where I'm at right now. And so it reminds me of when theists bring up an infinite regress. I almost agree with them. I just can't agree that a God fixes it. I could say this is as far back as we go, the Big Bang, which Darth didn't like, but that is as far. I'll even specify further, Planck time is as far back as we go. Other than that, we have no idea. And for me to make a claim that there has to be an eternal is me taking a position on which I don't think I or anyone else is currently qualified for.
Well, there is nothing logical which makes the existence or non-existence or something ontologically speaking impossible. So it is an ontological possibility, but the mere fact that we actually exist and that something cannot come from nothing because nothing has no causal powers leads logically and inevitably to the conclusion that something must have always existed.
I would say it could be the case that something has always existed, but when I point out that the universe could be eternal, then I get thrown in the back same question. Oh, the universe is eternal. Well, how can the universe be eternal? It had a beginning and all this stuff. And honestly, what I view as the beginning, they're saying the expansion rate, because it could be that's not actually the beginning. It could be we figure out how to understand the physics inside of a black hole one day. And once we understand how to put general relativity and quantum mechanics together, we may actually be able to see further back than the Big Bang, if such a thing is even possible.
Well, that draws a series of problems. First of all, you said that matter cannot be created nor destroyed. That's what you were talking at the beginning with Darth.
Yes, I was using, I would say, two premises. I would say first I start with matter cannot be created or destroyed. I then say take that back with Hubble. Let's extrapolate that back with Hubble's law, because Hubble's law is just everything, because of dark energy, is pushing everything away at the speed of light, sometimes faster than the speed of light. And yeah, I mean, it's the only thing we know of, and I'm not claiming, because that's the other thing, which is funny, which I actually take some positions against the monotheistic gods. I still don't think Darth would call me an atheist, because he makes the claim that you have to put the positive position that there are no any gods anywhere. And I can't make that claim. I can just say that from what I am learning from biology, computer science, and just the way that I guess the laws of logic, I just need to be given some sort of how do I check it? How can I check? Because Darth never even said God, but how am I supposed? His whole shtick is I need to get you to admit that there's some ultimate, so I can say God is ultimate. But most of the atheists don't care about an ultimate. That tends to be a theist type of position. We don't even have positions on this. If the physicists were to come to us with empirical evidence and they could prove it, and they'd be like, look, the universe had a beginning, that's generally what I think the skeptics would go by. But if the scientists came back with data empirically that we could show to everyone else and said, listen, guys, it's eternal. It just goes on and never ends, then I'd accept that. But I guess by not accepting a position, I am not trying to put myself where I have to give views that it's not even not qualified. There are physicists trying to figure out, just like with abiogenesis with biology. I would say, to take us down more rabbit holes, I think there's good evidence for a naturalistic abiogenesis. Does that mean that abiogenesis 100% formed from naturalistic means? No, that doesn't. But it's just you're trying to gather evidence.
Well, what I think is that many do not actually even consider that issue. And I mean, what I've recently learned, and that is a question which I'm starting to ask atheists, is this, and
Okay.
I'll quote here: in order to explain our existence, there has to be a starting point. How do you begin the sequence of events? What is at the beginning, if not an eternal conscious
But
creator? And following that, if the past is infinitely old, then getting from the past to the present would be like trying to climb to the surface of the earth from a hole infinitely deep, from a bottomless pit. That is from Stephen Meyer's new book, the Return of the God Hypothesis. And I think this is a very pertinent question. If you are in time and you have sections of time, and we are here right now, if you look back in the past, there has to be a starting point, because if there is an infinite past, then you can never reach the present moment here in time.
And to respond to that, I would say that it depends on what you mean by your starting point. Do you mean the starting point of humans? Do you mean the starting point of multicellular life? Do you mean the starting of life? Do you mean the starting of planets, or do you mean the starting of the universe? Because all of those have different starting points.
Yes, but I'm referring to the absolute beginning of the physical world. But what I think is remarkable, Amy, is that in each of these things which you just mentioned, what a key ingredient is instructional information, and that starts with the laws of physics. These laws of physics, the equations, they require very precise, specific um, constants and numbers which you put into these equations to get actually an equation which permits laws of physics which govern a universe which then is stable along eons of time. And if these numbers are different, then you don't have a stable and intelligible universe. So you have to ask yourself, what informs the right constants, the right equations which permit these laws of physics to be the right one, the right set of laws of physics? What are the how are the right
But
constants informed?
isn't the theistic claim that God is the one who set this?
Well, exactly. That's where we are getting at. What we are saying is that in order to have the right laws of physics, to have the right constants, to have the right fine tuning of the universe, the right expansion of the universe, the right initial
You're
conditions,
saying
right?
right.
You know, you have to have a mechanism for that, and this is a mechanism which has to inform the right constants, the right mathematical formulas, the right laws, the right fine tuning, the right information to start life, the right epigenetic information to have multicellularity and biodiversity. All these things require information. And if you remove an information giver, or someone that preordains this information, then you have no mechanism. Then you have basically nothing which restrains to the numbers which are required to have a universe which is life permitting.
Can I get a definition of information?
And information basically restricts possibilities. Let's suppose that you want a very specific outcome, and then you have a very restricted or constrained situation which you have to bring forward. And then you have to ask yourself, what is it that you posit which brings up exactly that specification and that complexity?
And so I'm going to push back on that definition. Don't think that is what information is. I think you said information is something that restricts things.
Well,
I
we can put two explanations of what we mean by information. We
well,
can
I can tell
use
you.
this, we can use descriptive information, which is where conscient beings like us observe something and then describe it and inform that specific device what it is about. That is a possibility. But then we have also instructional information, like for example, the information which instructs to make a machine or a factory or a computer. And then you have to put on the table, you need to have a language, you need to have a code, then you require a medium to store that information and use that code to inform how to make that device. And that is prescriptive information, which is precisely the information which we see in the genome, which prescribes the assembly information to make a protein or a cell factory.
And I think that's using two different types of information. So information is data that has been translated into something useful. Normally it's symbols. Data is often just symbols. And so you could just have a bunch of data out there, but once you actually can make it coherent in your brain, then you actually can say, not only do I have data, but I have information about what is going on.
You can have both, but you need for both a brain. You need intelligence. There is no mechanism known which can instantiate either descriptive or prescriptive information. You need a brain. And that's precisely the key point when we bring up the argument that the information which is stored in the genome requires intelligence, which prescribes and instantiates and puts that information there.
And I think that's not the right term of the word information, because information generally needs an agent to be the one that it's being informed. You need an agent to actually get information.
Well, that's precisely what I am saying, Amy. That is when we look into the cell, something which was not expected 100 years ago, and then in the 50s from the last century was discovered, is that there is a genome which stores precise, complex, specified information, or in other words, instructional assembly information, which directs the making of proteins and cell factories.
Can I tell you how it's different from an actual code, like a synthetic code? Because these don't have any people that it's making commands to, as in your genes are just going through the data and just building. It just says it's these 4 letters, we're just going to build this structure over here. But it's not like someone is choosing any of this. It's not like someone could choose to create the laws of nature.
Well, you are now mixing up things. We are talking here about instructional information which is stored in the genome. The question and the code is actually the language which has to be set up in order then to make the translation from genetic information to the sequence of amino acids, which is the alphabet of amino acids. That is the translation, and that requires the codification. But that is the language which is actually used to store the information, which is the sequence of codons which instruct the making of the right sequence of amino acids. And that sequence is specified and complex. You cannot have any kind of sequence. You need a very specific sequence, and it is a sequence which must be right amongst a huge number of sequences which are possible. And that's precisely the restriction or the restraint or the information where the information giver dictates the right sequence, which then in the end provides a protein which has function. And that is the big issue. Where does that information come from, and what mechanism instructs that information, that sequence?
And I would say it's an analogy. It's not true information. As in, it's a chemical reaction. It would almost be anthropomorphizing. Like the cells read what they're doing and go, okay, I got to put a red one over here and a green one over here. It is, it's not even a language because it's not communicating to other agents. It is, which is why all analogies break down. It is
Okay,
that
let
it
me
is
just stop
following a
you.
list of.
Okay, let me just stop you here. I think you have
Okay.
made here very severe and very evident conceptual. You have a conceptual misunderstanding of just about what I said here. No, it's
Okay.
not an analogy. It is, in a literal sense, that the sequence of nucleotides, which we have in the genome, directs precisely the sequence which is then instantiated in the amino acids which make proteins.
Do you think any of this chain is conscious?
It has nothing to do about consciousness, Amy.
Oh, but it
But
does, because I mean, if you're saying it's a code and codes come from conscious beings, which are the only ones we know of, we don't have no codes that come from non-conscious beings.
okay, listen. If you see a machine and that machine was made upon a blueprint,
Mhm.
then neither the blueprint nor the machine is conscious. Okay?
Wait, yeah, but
Right.
see,
Right.
the blueprint contains information, and then the person is the one who translate it.
And
Our
that and
genes are
that
just
and that
doing what they have no other choice. They don't have a
yes,
choice in this.
yes.
They have
And now listen, let me interrupt you. This is a
okay.
key point here, that the genes, of course, and the molecular machinery is pre-programmed to do what it does without any agency fumbling there and directing anything, because it happens like a robot. It
But
is
see,
already
and
it is
that
already there to do what it does. But the big issue of the question here is what instantiated that state of facts?
well, see, that's you're now asking the question that I can't answer because I don't know if there
Oh, and
can be
I
anything
and I
anything
can
further than
answer
that.
it, and
But you
I
don't have
can
evidence
answer
for
it.
it. You can
Oh, I
answer it, but you don't have
do.
evidence for
Well,
it. If
Eddie,
you're
I
gonna say
do.
God,
No, no, no. Listen carefully. This is a
okay.
crux issue here. I hear it all the time. Atheists saying, "Oh, but you cannot test the God hypothesis." Okay, we cannot test that God did it. But what we do know by experience, and we don't even need to make predictions because this is something which we already experience, is that we, as conscious, intelligent beings, we can instantiate and elaborate blueprints which then are used to make devices for specific purposes. We experience that we as intelligent beings can do this. I am a machine designer. I sit on the drawing table, and if my boss comes to me and says, I need that to make a design for a machine that has a specific purpose, then I will think how to solve the problem. And then eventually I come up with a solution of the problem, and I will put that on the table, on the paper, and I use a language which is the AutoCAD or whatever you like, and then I can put that drawing on the paper and it goes to the factory and people can actually read and understand what is there and then instantiate that machine or whatever device we are talking about. So this is an entirely intelligence-based and directed process. And that is an analogy exactly to what we see in the cell, where the information stored through the genetic code in the genome directs the making of proteins, which are in a literal sense molecular machines. And the proteome is a set of molecular machines which then are necessary to make the cell, which is in a literal sense, a chemical factory. So we have a perfect analogy here between what we do and what we see in the cell. So we can say what we see in the cell is the evidence. And since we know that only intelligent agents can make blueprints and machines and factories, then it is a logical inference that the genome and the proteome and cells were also instantiated by an intelligence.
But how is your information like the genome information? You were saying that someone could get you to hire a program. Can you? So, for example, can you write lines of comments in these codes? Can you change the code if if something's not working? Can you swap it up? Can you experiment with different sets of? It's not like
Yes,
there
of
is a
course.
being.
No. It's not that there. I mean, of course, you cannot imagine that there is a physical being fumbling there and doing things because God is a spirit. But the sequence of nucleotides is unconstrained. You can actually use any sequence in the genome which you like. And if it wouldn't be so, then there could be then the genome couldn't be an information bearer. But since the sequence is unconstrained and you can have any kind of sequence, that means that the sequence which is there and which is specified and complex requires an explanation. And we know that chance isn't a capable explanation, which is the only alternative which you actually have.
I don't think that we arose by chance. I think it's good reasons as to why we were here, and it just depends. The specific reason just depends on each level that we're looking at. Like, why did life arise here? I don't think it was by chance. I think the chemical combinations of this planet being so heavy in carbon, and then being also a water world because of just how unique water works. I think we have, and being in the habitable zone of our sun. So we have all these kind of a perfect storm to get life here. And to me, it makes perfect sense why carbon, the most volatile chemical on the list, would make chemical reactions like this.
Well, all these things have to be just right. I have collected here a link about the fine-tuning also, not only of the universe and the laws of physics and the constants and so forth, also carbon. In order to have carbon, there has to be a very specific set of chemical or physical interactions which provide you carbon and which is finely tuned. That the Earth also requires over 20 different parameters which have to be just right. But that is an entirely different topic, I would say. But since I think you have to go, I leave you that.
But it's been fun.
Yeah.
And I will say, I just want to say, I don't know what the difference is, but I had a good conversation, and I feel like Darth wants to have good conversations with atheists. I could tell Antangelo, you want him to have better conversations with him. And if he does watch this, I don't know if he does, but if he does, Darth, I still love you like I love all my theist brothers and sisters, just like I love Antangelo and I love everyone else. And thank you, Antangelo, so much. We'll do it again. We can have a longer conversation.
Sure. Okay. It was fun to have you here at my channel. It was good to talk to you. And keep in touch.
Woohoo, absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Okay, everyone. Bye-bye. See you next time.